The sound of hoofbeats approaching her farmhouse made Penelope Armstrong's heart sink, because she knew exactly who was coming and what he wanted to collect. She stood on the weathered porch of her small Oklahoma Territory home just outside Tulsa, wiping flour from her hands onto her faded apron as the banker's carriage pulled up, dust swirling around the wheels in the hot August sun of 1889. Her father had been dead 3 months now, and she had managed to keep the farm running through sheer determination and backbreaking work. But the bank wanted their money, and she had none to give. "Miss Armstrong," Mr. Thornton called out as he stepped down from his carriage, his expensive suit looking absurdly out of place against the backdrop of her struggling farm. "I trust you know why I am here." "I need more time," Penelope said, hating how her voice wavered despite her best efforts to sound strong. At 23 years old, she had never imagined she would be fighting alone to save the only home she had ever known. Her father had taken out the loan to buy new equipment, but he had died of fever before the harvest could pay it back. Now the bank wanted the full amount, and she had until the end of September to come up with $500 or lose everything. "The bank has been patient, Miss Armstrong, but business is business. Unless you can provide payment or find a husband to take on the debt, I am afraid the property will be seized." Mr. Thornton pulled out his pocket watch, glanced at it, then looked at her with something that might have been pity. "You have 4 weeks. After he left, Penelope sank onto the porch steps and allowed herself exactly 5 minutes to feel the despair that threatened to overwhelm her. Then she stood, brushed off her skirt, and went back inside to finish the bread she had been making. Crying would not save her farm, and neither would giving up. She needed a solution, and she needed one fast. That evening, she sat at her small kitchen table with a piece of paper and a pencil, making a list of every possible option. She could try to sell some of her livestock, but that would only bring in maybe $50 at most. She could take on more sewing work, but there was not enough time to earn what she needed. The third option on her list made her stomach twist with anxiety, but it was the only realistic solution: find a husband. The problem was that most of the single men in Tulsa were either too young, too old, or had already made their interest in acquiring her land very clear in ways that made her skin crawl. She did not want to marry someone who saw her as nothing more than property to be claimed. But what choice did she have? The next morning, Penelope drove her wagon into town, her mind still churning through possibilities. She needed to pick up supplies from the general store, and she hoped that somehow inspiration would strike. The streets of Tulsa were busy with the usual mix of farmers, ranch hands, and businessmen going about their day. The town had grown considerably since the land run earlier that year, with new buildings going up and more people arriving every week seeking their fortune in the newly opened territory. She had just stepped out of the general store, her arms full of packages, when she collided with someone coming around the corner. Her parcels went flying, and strong hands caught her arms to steady her. "I apologize, madam. I was not watching where I was going," a deep voice said. Penelope looked up into the face of a man she had never seen before. He was tall, probably in his late 20s, with dark hair that touched his collar and striking blue eyes that held genuine concern. He wore the clothes of a working ranch hand, but there was something about the way he carried himself that suggested he was used to being in charge. "No, it was my fault," Penelope said, stepping back and immediately crouching to gather her scattered packages. The stranger knelt beside her, helping to collect everything. "You are Penelope Armstrong," he said, and it was not a question. She looked at him in surprise. "How did you know?" "I have been asking around town about farms in the area. Your place came up more than once." He handed her the last package and stood, offering his hand to help her up. "My name is Vincent Nash. I am looking for work and I heard you might need help with your farm." Penelope felt her heart skip. This was too convenient to be coincidence. "Who told you that?" "The man at the feed store mentioned you have been running the place alone since your father passed. Said you were doing a good job of it too, but that it was too much for one person." Vincent's expression was open and honest, and Penelope found herself wanting to trust him, which immediately made her cautious. "I cannot afford to hire anyone right now," she said carefully, adjusting the packages in her arms. "I heard about your situation with the bank too," Vincent said, his voice lowering so others walking past would not overhear. "I have a proposition for you if you are willing to hear it. Could we speak somewhere private?" Every instinct told Penelope this was insane. She did not know this man, and he was a stranger who had clearly been asking questions about her. But desperation made people consider options they would normally reject out of hand. "There is a small restaurant 2 buildings down. We could talk there." 10 minutes later, they sat across from each other at a corner table with cups of coffee neither of them was drinking. Vincent leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table, and spoke in a low, earnest voice. "I am going to be direct with you because I think we are both in situations that call for honesty. I need to settle down somewhere. I have been moving from place to place for the past 5 years, working ranches and saving money. I have about $400 saved, which is close to what you need to pay off your debt. I want land of my own, a place to build something permanent. You need money and probably a husband to satisfy the bank's requirements." Penelope stared at him, her coffee forgotten. "You are proposing marriage to a complete stranger." "I am proposing a business arrangement that benefits both of us," Vincent corrected. "You keep your farm, I get a place to finally settle down and call home. We would be partners in running the place. If it does not work out, we could go our separate ways after a year, but at least you would not lose your father's land." "Why would you give your savings to someone you do not know?" Penelope asked, suspicious of his motives. "What is really in this for you?" Vincent was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. 5 years ago, my family's ranch in Texas was taken by a man who manipulated the law to steal it from us. My father died trying to fight it, and my mother passed shortly after from heartbreak. I know what it feels like to lose the place you love because of circumstances beyond your control. When I heard about your situation, I thought maybe I could help prevent that from happening to someone else. And honestly, I am tired of drifting. I want roots again." There was such raw sincerity in his words that Penelope felt something shift in her chest. She studied his face, looking for any sign of deception, but all she saw was weariness and hope mixed together. "You understand this would be a real marriage. The bank would investigate to make sure it was legitimate. I understand. I would expect us to live as respectfully as any 2 people sharing a home. We would figure out the rest as we go." Vincent met her eyes steadily. "I am not asking you to love me, Miss Armstrong. I am asking you to let me help you save your farm." Penelope took a sip of her now lukewarm coffee, her mind racing. This was crazy, absolutely insane. She would be marrying a complete stranger and tying her entire future to someone she had known for all of 30 minutes. But what other choice did she have? In 4 weeks, she would lose everything unless she could produce both money and a husband. Vincent Nash was offering both. "I need time to think about this," she finally said. "Of course. But I should tell you that I would need to know within a week. If we are going to do this, we need time to make it look convincing to the bank." Vincent pulled out a piece of paper and wrote down an address. "I am staying at the boarding house on Main Street. You can send word there when you have decided." Penelope took the paper, folded it carefully, and tucked it into her pocket. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Nash. I will consider it seriously. That is all I ask." They parted ways outside the restaurant, and Penelope drove her wagon home in a daze. The rational part of her brain screamed that this was foolishness. But the practical part, the part that had kept her going through 3 months of grueling work and loneliness, whispered that this might be her only real option. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about Vincent Nash. He had kind eyes and gentle hands. He had not looked at her farm with greed or at her with improper interest. He had simply made a straightforward business proposition, one that would benefit them both. Could it really be that simple? Over the next 3 days, Penelope made discreet inquiries about Vincent Nash. She learned that he had been working at the Morrison Ranch for the past 2 weeks and had impressed everyone with his skill with horses and his strong work ethic. He kept to himself mostly, but was polite and respectful to everyone. No one had a bad word to say about him, which in itself was remarkable in a small town where gossip spread faster than wildfire. On the 4th day, Penelope made her decision. She drove into town, went to the boarding house, and asked for Vincent Nash. He came down the stairs a few minutes later, surprise and hope flickering across his face when he saw her. "Mr. Nash, could we speak outside?" she asked. They walked to a quiet spot near the edge of town where they could talk without being overheard. Penelope had rehearsed what she wanted to say, but now that the moment was here, the words tangled on her tongue. "I will marry you," she finally said, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "But I have conditions." "Name them." "We should be honest with each other always. If this arrangement is not working for either of us, we need to be able to say so. And while I understand this starts as a business arrangement, I will not be treated as property or a servant in my own home. We are partners, or this does not work." "Agreed," Vincent said immediately. "I have a condition too. We give this a real chance. Not just the business part, but actually trying to build something together. A year minimum before we make any decisions about ending things. Is that fair?" Penelope considered this and nodded. A year was reasonable. A year would tell them if they could make this work. "When should we do this?" "As soon as possible. We can get married at the courthouse tomorrow if you are willing. Then I can pay off your debt, and we can start working on making your farm profitable again." Vincent paused, then added, "Our farm." Something about the way he said that, the certainty and the partnership implicit in those 2 words, made Penelope's decision feel a little less terrifying. "Tomorrow, then. I will meet you at the courthouse at 10 in the morning. I will be there." True to his word, Vincent was waiting on the courthouse steps when Penelope arrived the next morning. She had worn her best dress, a simple blue cotton that had been her mother's, and had taken extra care with her hair. This might be a business arrangement, but it was still her wedding day, and some part of her wanted to mark the occasion as special. Vincent had clearly had the same thought. He wore a new shirt and had gotten a haircut. When he saw her coming up the steps, his face broke into a genuine smile that transformed his usually serious expression. "You look beautiful," he said, offering his arm. "Thank you. You clean up quite well yourself." Penelope took his arm, feeling the solid strength beneath the fabric of his shirt. The ceremony itself was brief and businesslike. They stood before the judge, repeated their vows, and signed the necessary papers. Vincent produced a simple gold band that he slipped onto her finger, and just like that, Penelope Armstrong became Penelope Nash. It felt surreal and overwhelming and somehow right all at the same time. After the ceremony, they went directly to the bank. Vincent handed over $400 in cash, and Penelope added the $75 she had managed to save. It was not quite enough, but Mr. Thornton, Faced with a paid-in-full account and Penelope's new husband standing protectively at her side, agreed to reduce the final amount owed in exchange for settling the debt immediately. "Congratulations on your marriage, Mrs. Nash," Mr. Thornton said, his tone suggesting he suspected exactly what had transpired but could not prove anything improper. "I trust your farm will prosper now." "It will," Vincent said firmly, taking Penelope's hand. "We will make certain of it." They walked out of the bank as husband and wife, the weight of debt finally lifted from Penelope's shoulders. She should have felt relieved, triumphant even, but instead she felt oddly nervous. They were married now. This stranger was her husband, and he would be coming home with her, living in her house, sharing her life. Vincent must have sensed her tension because he squeezed her hand gently. "We will figure this out," he said quietly. "One day at a time." The ride back to the farm was mostly silent, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. When they arrived, Vincent helped her down from the wagon with careful courtesy, then stood looking at the property with an expression she could not quite read. "What are you thinking?" Penelope asked. "I am thinking that your father built something good here. The land is solid, the house is well constructed, and with some work, this could be one of the most productive farms in the area." He turned to look at her. "I am thinking that I am grateful you trusted me enough to let me help." "I am grateful you offered," Penelope replied honestly. "I do not know what I would have done if you had not appeared when you did." "I believe things happen for a reason," Vincent said. "Maybe we were both supposed to find each other." Over the next few weeks, they fell into a rhythm that surprised Penelope with its ease. Vincent proved to be an incredibly hard worker, up before dawn and working until well after sunset. He repaired fences, tended to the animals, and managed to fix several pieces of equipment that had broken and that Penelope had not had the strength or knowledge to repair herself. He was also remarkably considerate about the living arrangements. He had insisted on taking the small room off the kitchen that her father had used as an office, converting it into a bedroom for himself so Penelope could keep her own room. He never entered her space without knocking and always asked before making any changes to the house or the farm routine. They worked side by side during the day, ate meals together, and talked in the evenings about plans for the farm and stories from their pasts. Penelope found herself looking forward to those evening conversations. Vincent was intelligent and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. He told her about growing up on his family's ranch, about learning to break horses from his father, and to read the weather from his grandfather. She told him about her childhood, about her mother who had died when she was 12, and about her father who had worked himself to exhaustion trying to make the farm succeed. "He would have liked you," Penelope said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set. "My father, I mean. He always said the measure of a man was in his willingness to work hard and treat people fairly." "I wish I could have met him," Vincent said. "From everything you have told me, he raised a remarkable daughter." The compliment, delivered so sincerely, made warmth spread through Penelope's chest. She glanced at Vincent and found him already looking at her, something soft and unguarded in his expression that made her breath catch. "We should go into town tomorrow," she said, suddenly needing to break the intensity of the moment. "We need supplies, and people will expect to see us together now that we are married." "Good idea. We should probably make it clear that this is a real marriage, not just a convenience." Vincent stood and stretched, his shirt pulling tight across his shoulders. "I will go check on the animals one more time before bed. Good night, Penelope." "Good night, Vincent." After he left, Penelope sat alone in the growing darkness, her thoughts whirling. Something was happening between them, something neither of them had planned for. She found herself noticing things about Vincent that had nothing to do with their business arrangement. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. The gentleness in his hands when he worked with the horses. The sound of his voice in the morning, still rough with sleep, calling out a greeting as he started his day. This was dangerous territory. She had agreed to a marriage of convenience, a practical solution to a desperate problem. Falling for her husband had not been part of the plan. But as she touched the gold band on her finger, Penelope could not deny the truth. She was beginning to care for Vincent Nash far more than was wise. The next day, they drove into Tulsa together. Penelope wore one of her better dresses, and Vincent had once again cleaned up nicely. They made their necessary purchases at the general store, and Penelope noticed the curious looks and whispered conversations that followed them. News of their sudden marriage had clearly spread, and people were eager to see them together. Mrs. Nash, a woman's voice called out, and Penelope turned to see Sarah Mitchell, one of the few women in town she considered a friend. "I heard the wonderful news. Congratulations on your marriage." "Thank you, Sarah." Penelope felt Vincent come to stand beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "You are a fortunate woman," Sarah continued, her eyes assessing Vincent with obvious approval. "And you, Mr. Nash, are fortunate as well. Penelope is one of the hardest working, most capable women I know." "I am very aware of how fortunate I am," Vincent said, and there was something in his voice that made Penelope's heart skip. He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers in a gesture that looked natural and comfortable, though it sent electricity shooting up her arm. "I am grateful every day that she agreed to marry me." They spent another hour in town, and by the time they headed home, Penelope's hand felt strange without Vincent's holding it. He had maintained the physical contact throughout their visit, and it had felt surprisingly right. Now, sitting beside him on the wagon seat with a careful distance between them, she found herself missing that warmth. "You did not have to say those things," she said as they left town behind. "About being grateful I married you." "I meant every word," Vincent replied, keeping his eyes on the road. "This past month working beside you, getting to know you, has been good, better than good. I feel like I have finally found where I am supposed to be." "I feel the same way," Penelope admitted softly. "When you first proposed this arrangement, I was so desperate I would have agreed to almost anything. But now I am glad it was you who offered. I cannot imagine anyone else here with me." Vincent turned to look at her then, and the wagon slowed as he pulled back on the reins. They stopped in the middle of the empty road, and he shifted to face her fully. "Penelope, I need to tell you something, and I need you to know I am not saying this to make you feel obligated in any way." He took a breath, his jaw tightening with what looked like nervousness. "This started as a business arrangement, but somewhere along the way it became more for me. I find myself thinking about you all the time. When I am working in the fields, I look forward to dinner because I will get to talk to you. When I go to bed at night, I lie awake thinking about you just down the hall. I am falling for you, and I needed you to know." Penelope's heart thundered in her chest. She had been so afraid that her growing feelings were one-sided that Vincent still saw this as merely a practical arrangement. Hearing him voice the same confusion and attraction she had been feeling made something settle into place inside her. "I am falling for you too," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been trying not to because I did not want to make things complicated, but Vincent, you make me feel things I have never felt before. You make me want things I thought I would never have." "What things?" Vincent asked, reaching out to cup her cheek with his calloused hand. "A real marriage. A real partner, maybe even a family someday." Penelope leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly at the tenderness in the gesture. "I want this to be real between us." "It already is real," Vincent said, and then he was leaning in and Penelope met him halfway. Their first kiss was gentle and questioning, a tentative exploration that quickly deepened into something more. Penelope had been kissed before, but never like this. Never with such a perfect combination of passion and tenderness, never with such a sense of rightness. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "We should probably get home before people start wondering why we are stopped in the middle of the road." Penelope laughed, a sound of pure joy that surprised her with its intensity. "Probably wise." The rest of the ride home passed in comfortable silence, but now Vincent's hand covered hers on the wagon seat, and every so often she would catch him glancing at her with a small smile playing at his lips. When they arrived at the farm, he helped her down, but this time his hands lingered at her waist, and when she looked up at him, he kissed her again. "I have been wanting to do that for weeks," he admitted. "Why did you wait so long?" Penelope asked, her arms looping around his neck. "I wanted you to be sure. I wanted you to choose me, not because you felt you had to, but because you wanted to." Vincent's arms tightened around her. "I need you to know that I would never pressure you into anything. We can take this as slow as you need." "What if I do not want to go slow?" Penelope surprised herself with her boldness, but Vincent's confession had broken down the walls she had been carefully maintaining. Life was uncertain and often brutal. When something good and real presented itself, holding back seemed foolish. Vincent's eyes darkened with desire, but his voice remained gentle. "Then we will not go slow. But Penelope, I want you to understand something. When I married you, I meant those vows. This is not temporary for me anymore. I am in this for the long term, for however long you will have me." "Forever," Penelope said, and realized she meant it. "I want you here forever." That night, Vincent moved his belongings into Penelope's room, and their marriage became real in every sense of the word. They came together with a passion that surprised them both, but also with a tenderness that spoke to the genuine affection that had been growing between them. Afterwards, lying in Vincent's arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Penelope felt a sense of peace she had not experienced since her father's death. "I never expected this," she murmured, tracing idle patterns on his skin. "I never expected to fall this hard this fast." "Neither did I," Vincent said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "But I am not complaining. The people in town are going to think we are ridiculous, acting like newlyweds who are actually in love." "We are newlyweds who are actually in love," Vincent pointed out. "Let them think what they want. I know the truth, and so do you." Over the following months, they worked together to transform the farm. Vincent's knowledge and experience combined with Penelope's determination, an intimate understanding of the land, created a partnership that proved incredibly effective. They expanded the vegetable garden, bought additional livestock with money Vincent had held back from his savings, and made connections with buyers in nearby towns. The physical labor was exhausting, but they ended each day together, usually sitting on the porch in the evening, planning and dreaming about the future. Vincent talked about buying more land eventually, maybe breeding horses since he had such a gift with them. Penelope shared her hope of having children someday, of filling the house with life and laughter. "How many children do you want?" Vincent asked one evening as they watched storm clouds gather on the horizon. "I do not know. Maybe 3 or 4. I always wished I had siblings growing up." Penelope leaned against his shoulder, breathing in his familiar scent of leather and hard work. "What about you?" "I want as many as you are willing to give me," Vincent said, turning to kiss her temple. "I want this house full of children who never have to wonder if they are loved or if they have a secure home. I want to build something that lasts for generations." "We will," Penelope assured him. "Together, we can do anything." The winter of 1889 was harsh, but they weathered it together. When snow made it impossible to work outside, they spent their time maintaining equipment, planning for spring planting, and simply enjoying each other's company. Vincent taught Penelope to play chess, and she taught him to make his mother's biscuit recipe that he had been craving since childhood. It was during one of those snowbound days that Penelope realized her monthly courses were late. She waited another week before saying anything, not wanting to raise hopes prematurely. But when the signs became undeniable, she told Vincent over breakfast. "I think I might be with child," she said, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup as much for something to hold onto as for warmth. Vincent's fork clattered to his plate. "Truly, I am not completely certain yet, but all the signs point to it." Penelope watched his face carefully, trying to gauge his reaction. In one smooth motion, Vincent was out of his chair and pulling her into his arms. "A baby," he said, wonder evident in his voice. "We are going to have a baby. You are happy about this?" Penelope had to ask, even though his reaction made the answer obvious. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Vincent said, cupping her face in his hands. "Penelope, you have given me so much already. A home, a purpose, your love, and now this. I am the most fortunate man alive." "We are both fortunate," Penelope said, kissing him. "We found each other when we both needed it most." The pregnancy was confirmed by the doctor a few weeks later, and the news spread through Tulsa quickly. People who had been suspicious of their hasty marriage had softened over the months, as it became clear that Vincent and Penelope were genuinely in love and committed to each other. The news of a baby was met with congratulations and well wishes, and Penelope found herself welcomed into the community in ways she had not been before. Sarah Mitchell organized a quilting circle that met weekly to make baby clothes and blankets, and Penelope found herself with a group of friends she had never had before. The women shared advice, stories, and support, and Penelope realized that her life had changed in ways that went far beyond just saving her farm. As spring arrived and the farm came back to life, so did Penelope's energy after a difficult first few months of pregnancy. She and Vincent planted an ambitious crop, and they worked together in the fields until her growing belly made it impossible to bend and stretch the way she needed to. Vincent was protective but not overbearing, understanding her need to stay active while also making sure she did not overdo it. "I am pregnant, not fragile," she reminded him one afternoon when he tried to take a basket of laundry from her. "I know that," Vincent said, kissing her nose. "But you are carrying our child, and I intend to take care of you both whether you like it or not." "I like it," Penelope admitted, softening. "I like it very much." Their son was born on a cool October evening in 1890, attended by the doctor and Sarah Mitchell. It was a long labor, and Vincent paced the kitchen floor anxiously until finally Sarah emerged to tell him he had a healthy baby boy. "Can I see her? Can I see them both?" Vincent asked, already heading toward the bedroom. "Give us just a moment to get cleaned up and then yes," Sarah said with a smile. When Vincent finally entered the bedroom, he found Penelope propped up against pillows, exhausted but radiant, with a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket in her arms. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. "Meet your son," she said softly. Vincent approached slowly, almost reverently, and sat carefully on the edge of the bed. He looked down at the baby's tiny face, the small fists waving aimlessly, and felt his heart expand in ways he had not known were possible. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered, running one finger gently over the baby's cheek. "What should we name him?" "I was thinking Thomas, after my father," Penelope said. "If that is acceptable to you." "Thomas Nash," Vincent said, testing the name. It is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect." He leaned in to kiss Penelope gently. "Thank you for this gift. Thank you for trusting me and taking a chance on us." "Best decision I ever made," Penelope said, leaning her head against his shoulder as they both looked down at their son. The years that followed were not without challenges. There were difficult seasons when crops failed and money was tight. There were times when they disagreed about decisions regarding the farm and had to learn to compromise. But through it all, their love continued to deepen and strengthen. Thomas was followed by a daughter 2 years later, whom they named Margaret after Vincent's mother. 2 years after that, another son arrived, named Samuel. Each child was welcomed with joy and celebration, and their home was indeed filled with the life and laughter they had dreamed of. Vincent's dream of breeding horses became reality when they were able to purchase additional land and began building a reputation for quality stock. Penelope's vegetable garden became so productive that she was able to sell produce at the market in Tulsa, bringing in steady additional income. Together, they built not just a successful farm but a true home, a legacy for their children and the generations to come. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1899, Vincent woke Penelope before dawn and led her out to the porch where they had spent so many evenings planning their future. "Do you remember the first time we sat here together?" he asked, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the sun begin to rise over their land. "I remember thinking I had made the craziest decision of my life, marrying a stranger," Penelope said with a laugh. "I remember being terrified and hopeful at the same time." "I remember thinking you were the bravest woman I had ever met," Vincent said. "Taking a chance on me, trusting me with your home and your future. I promised myself that day that I would spend the rest of my life making sure you never regretted that trust." "I never have," Penelope said, turning to face him. "Not for a single moment. You saved my farm, Vincent, but more than that, you saved me. You gave me a life I never dreamed I could have." "We saved each other," Vincent corrected, kissing her softly. "I was drifting lost until I found you. You gave me purpose and a home and a family. You gave me everything that matters." "I love you," Penelope said, the words as easy and natural now as breathing. "I love you more than I did yesterday and less than I will tomorrow." "I love you too," Vincent replied, "always and forever." As the sun continued to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they sat together in comfortable silence, watching their land come to life. In the distance, they could hear their children beginning to stir, and soon the house would be filled with noise and activity. But for this moment, it was just the two of them, remembering how they started and marveling at how far they had come. The farm that Penelope had nearly lost now thrived under their combined care. The debt that had once threatened to destroy her was long paid off, and they had even managed to save a considerable amount for their children's futures. But more important than any financial success was the family they had built together, the love that filled every corner of their home. As they stood to go inside and start their day, Vincent pulled Penelope close one more time. "Thank you for agreeing to marry me to save your farm," he said with a smile. "It was supposed to be a business arrangement. Neither of us expected to fall this hard this fast," Penelope finished, grinning up at him. "But I am so grateful we did." Years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Thomas grew into a responsible young man who loved working the land as much as his parents did. Margaret inherited her mother's fierce independence and her father's way with horses. Samuel, the youngest, showed an interest in reading and learning that suggested he might be the first in the family to pursue education beyond what was available locally. When Oklahoma officially became a state in 1907, Vincent and Penelope stood with their children in Tulsa watching the celebrations, reflecting on how much had changed since that desperate day in 1889, when a banker had given Penelope 4 weeks to save her farm. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had not come to Tulsa that summer?" Vincent asked, his arm around Penelope's waist as they watched fireworks light up the night sky. "I try not to," Penelope admitted. "I probably would have lost the farm. I might have been forced to move to the city to find work. I definitely would not have this life, these children, this happiness." "I would have kept drifting," Vincent said, "moving from place to place, never finding where I belonged, never finding you." "Fate brought us together," Penelope said firmly. "I have to believe that. Everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to, even though it seemed so desperate and frightening at the time." "Do you remember telling me in the restaurant that day that I was proposing marriage to a complete stranger?" Vincent asked with a laugh. "I remember thinking you were either the answer to my prayers or completely insane," Penelope said. "Possibly both." "Definitely both," Vincent agreed. "But it worked out pretty well, would you not say?" "Better than well," Penelope said, rising on her toes to kiss him. "It worked out perfectly." As their children grew into adults and began families of their own, Vincent and Penelope found themselves becoming grandparents. Thomas married a schoolteacher from Tulsa and took over the main farm operations, building a house on the property near his parents. Margaret married a rancher from a neighboring county and was known throughout the region for her skill in training horses. Samuel, as predicted, pursued his education and became a teacher, though he always returned home for holidays and important family gatherings. The farmhouse that had once been home to just Penelope and her father, then Penelope and Vincent, now regularly hosted large family gatherings where 3 generations would crowd around tables laden with food, filling the rooms with conversation and laughter. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1914, their children threw them a celebration in town. Nearly everyone from Tulsa and the surrounding areas attended, a testament to the respect and affection Vincent and Penelope had earned over the years through hard work, fair dealing, and genuine kindness to their neighbors. Sarah Mitchell, now in her 60s, cornered Penelope at the party. "I remember when you married Vincent," she said with a knowing smile. "Everyone in town had opinions about it, most of them not particularly kind. But you two proved everyone wrong. You built something real and lasting." "We were fortunate to find each other," Penelope said, watching Vincent across the room as he laughed with a group of men, their son Thomas at his side. "It was not fortune," Sarah said. "It was 2 people who were brave enough to take a risk and smart enough to recognize something valuable when they found it. You and Vincent, you chose to make it work. That is more important than luck any day." Later that evening, after the party had ended and they had returned home, Vincent and Penelope walked out to their favorite spot on the porch. The evening was warm, and the sounds of their farm settling in for the night provided a peaceful backdrop. 25 years, Penelope mused, settling into the chair that had become hers over the decades. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you walked into my life. Other times, I can barely remember what life was like before you." "I know what you mean," Vincent said, taking the chair beside hers and reaching for her hand. "I have lived more life in the past 25 years with you than in all the years before combined." "Do you have any regrets?" Penelope asked, though she was fairly certain she knew the answer. "Not a single one," Vincent said firmly. "Marrying you, building this life together, raising our children on this land your father worked so hard to keep, it has all been exactly what I was meant to do. You are exactly who I was meant to find." "I feel the same way," Penelope said softly. I thought I was just trying to save my farm. I had no idea I was actually finding my future." They sat in comfortable silence as stars began to appear overhead. This land, this home, this life they had built together, it all started with a desperate choice and an improbable offer from a stranger. But it had grown into something neither of them could have imagined in those early, uncertain days. "You remember what you said to me the day we met?" Vincent asked. "In the restaurant when I first proposed this arrangement." "I said you were proposing marriage to a complete stranger," Penelope recalled with a smile. "And I said I was proposing a business arrangement that would benefit both of us," Vincent continued. "I thought I was being so practical and sensible, offering a solution to both our problems." "What changed?" Penelope asked, though she had heard this story many times over the years and never tired of it. "I looked at you standing there, so proud and scared and determined all at once, and I felt something shift inside me. Even then, before I knew you at all, something in me recognized something in you. We were supposed to find each other, Penelope. Everything else just fell into place after that." "We fell into place," Penelope corrected. "We fell in love when neither of us was expecting to. We fell so hard and so fast that it should have been terrifying, but instead it felt like coming home." "It was coming home," Vincent said, raising her hand to his lips. "You became my home from the moment you agreed to take a chance on me." As the years continued to pass, Vincent and Penelope aged gracefully together, their love growing richer with each passing season. They watched their children raise families of their own, passing down the lessons they had learned about hard work, dedication, and the importance of choosing love every single day. When Vincent turned 60 in 1921, his children threw him a party on the farm. Watching his grandchildren play in the same fields where he had worked so hard to build a life, surrounded by the family he and Penelope had created together, he felt a profound sense of gratitude and accomplishment. Penelope found him sitting alone on the porch that evening after the party had ended, staring out at the land they had nurtured for over 3 decades. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, settling into her chair beside him. "I am thinking about how that banker giving you 4 weeks to save your farm was actually the best thing that could have happened to both of us," Vincent said with a laugh. "If he had given you more time, you might have found another solution. I might have moved on to another town. We might have never met." "I do not want to imagine that," Penelope said with a shiver. "I cannot imagine my life without you in it." "You do not have to," Vincent assured her, taking her hand. "I am not going anywhere. I plan to be sitting in this chair beside you for many more years to come." "Good," Penelope said simply, "because I am not done with you yet." They sat together as the sun set over their farm, over the land that had brought them together, and that they had made flourish through hard work and dedication. But more than the land, more than the success they had achieved, it was this quiet companionship, this deep and abiding love that made everything worthwhile. The years of the 1920s brought change to Oklahoma and to the nation as a whole. The farm continued to prosper under Thomas's management, with Vincent and Penelope taking on more advisory roles as they aged. They had the luxury now of spending their days as they chose, though both still rose early from decades of habit and found themselves drawn to the work that had shaped their lives. Their grandchildren adored them, often begging to stay at the farmhouse where grandmother Penelope would tell stories and grandfather Vincent would teach them to ride horses. The younger children had no idea that their grandparents' marriage had begun as a business arrangement. To them, Vincent and Penelope were simply the most loving couple they knew, completely devoted to each other and to their family. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1929, the entire family gathered for a massive celebration. Children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren filled the property. As Vincent and Penelope stood together, watching their legacy surround them, they marveled at how far they had come from that desperate meeting in town so many years ago. 40 years, Vincent said, shaking his head in wonder. When I offered to marry you to save your farm, I imagined maybe we would become friends, partners in running the place. I never dreamed it would become this. Neither did I, Penelope admitted, leaning against him as she had done countless times over the decades. At 63 years old, she was still beautiful to him, her hair now silver but her eyes still bright with intelligence and spirit. I never dreamed I could love someone as much as I love you. I never dreamed we could build something this wonderful together. We built it because we did not just agree to marry, Vincent said, turning to face her and taking both her hands in his. We agreed to actually be married, to work at it every day, to choose each other over and over again. That is what made the difference. That and the fact that we fell ridiculously hard and fast for each other, Penelope added with a laugh. Neither of us stood a chance against that kind of instant attraction. Thank goodness we did not fight it, Vincent said, pulling her close for a kiss that still, after 40 years, made her heart race. Their youngest grandson, watching from across the yard, tugged on his father's sleeve. Papa, do grandmother and grandfather ever stop kissing? Samuel laughed and ruffled his son's hair. No, son, they do not. And that is exactly how love is supposed to work. You remember that when you grow up. As the celebration continued around them, Vincent and Penelope slipped away to their favorite spot on the porch, seeking a quiet moment together amid the happy chaos of family. You ever think about that first night? Penelope asked. After we got married and came back here. I was so nervous I could barely breathe. I was terrified, Vincent admitted. I kept thinking you were going to change your mind, tell me you had made a mistake and ask me to leave. I almost did, Penelope confessed. Not because I wanted you to leave, but because everything felt so overwhelming. My whole life had changed in a matter of days. What stopped you? Vincent asked, genuinely curious. They had never discussed this particular aspect of their early days. The way you looked at me, Penelope said simply. Even then, when we barely knew each other, you looked at me like I mattered, like I was more than just a desperate woman who needed saving. You looked at me like you actually saw me. I did see you, Vincent said. I saw a strong, brave woman who was fighting to keep what was hers. I saw someone who matched my own stubbornness and determination. I saw someone I wanted to know better, to build a life with. And we did, Penelope said with satisfaction. We built a beautiful life. As evening fell and their family began to depart, promises to visit soon echoing through the farmyard, Vincent and Penelope remained on the porch, watching the last of the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. I am glad you asked around town about farms that needed help, Penelope said softly. I am glad you literally ran into me that day, Vincent replied. Best collision of my life. Best decision of my life was saying yes to your proposal, Penelope said. Even though it was absolutely insane to marry a stranger. Best decision of my life was asking, Vincent said. Even though I had no idea what I was really offering us both. You were offering me a future, Penelope said. You were offering us both a chance at happiness. And we took that chance and turned it into something incredible. They sat together until the stars came out. Two people who had started as strangers brought together by desperation and had become the greatest love story they knew. Their farm, saved by a marriage of convenience, had become the foundation for generations of family. Their partnership, forged in necessity, had deepened into a love that sustained them through decades of joys and challenges. As they finally rose to go inside, Vincent paused to kiss his wife once more, his hand cupping her cheek with the same tenderness he had shown on their first real kiss all those years ago. "I love you, Penelope Nash," he said. "More today than yesterday and less than tomorrow." "I love you too, Vincent Nash," Penelope replied. "Always and forever, just like we promised." They walked into their home together, hands linked as they had been for 40 years, grateful for a desperate situation that had brought them together, for the courage to take a chance on each other, and for falling harder and faster than either of them had expected. It had started with an agreement to marry to save a farm, but it had become something neither of them could have imagined. A true and lasting love that would endure for all their days. The farm that had nearly been lost became a place of safety and love for generations, and the marriage that started as a business arrangement became the stuff of family legend. Proof that sometimes the best things in life come from taking chances and opening your heart to unexpected possibilities.